If you said there was a spectrum of risk and there's risk averse and like pro risk, I was definitely pretty far on the pro risk. Now I am taking these risks when I have a younger family because now I'm changing my frame of reference and I'm thinking, hey, when I have my second child or whatever comes after that, it will be even riskier then. So now I might as well take all the maximum risk.
Hello and welcome to the Randall Osche podcast, where honest conversations take the lead. Each week, we sit down with entrepreneurs, artists, thinkers, and change makers to unpack how they got from there to here and what they learned along the way. Real stories, no filters, lessons earned through experience. So you can take what's useful and leave the rest. Whether you're tuning in during your commute, a workout, or while making dinner, we're glad you're here. So take a seat, relax, grab a cup of tea, and join in the conversation. Now, let's get into this week's episode.
Karan Khiani, welcome to the show. Karan is the founder of Enablism. Enablism is a product that helps articulate value through the customer journey. Anything you'd like to add to that brief introduction?
Thanks, Randall. No, I just say that I'm a very sort of tech software person by education, by interest, by background, and somehow over many stages of life and sort of a fun journey, ended up in this sort of world of value and value enablement. I think we have a kind of unique angle to all of it, but I'm sure we'll get into some of that. But yeah.
Most of my conversations bounce all over the place. We're jumping in here early. I think what will be best, let's talk a little bit about Enablism and then we'll reverse engineer like the path there. So Why don't you tell me a little bit about how we got to where we're at today? Like what is Enablism?
Yeah, sure. I wouldn't have described this in this way a year ago. Now we've had some time to let this sort of thinking marinate a bit. Today, I describe Enablism as a product that helps businesses, teams articulate the value of their offering throughout the customer journey. So not just pre-sale, but also post-sale. So really every stage of the customer journey, even if it's a lighter touch during the kind of top of funnel marketing phase, that sort of thing. And the way we got here, an interesting story, I was at a fintech in Toronto. It was my first sort of revenue focused role in a pre-sales role. And if you can imagine being at a 50-person company, 60-person company, I don't really have the luxury of a big support cast. I'm really a sort of team of one at the time. And it became clear to me that I was at an organization that was building a product where there was a tangible kind of ROI. Customers would seek out that ROI, at least a majority of them would. And it was really on me to put some sort of consistency in place in terms of driving the value narrative. And that was the very kind of initial seed of, hey, like what if there was a product, an internal tool at the time that would make it easy for not just me, because I really would become a bottleneck, but to put a tool in the hands of the salespeople where they could do some discovery, and a natural byproduct of that discovery would be some kind of output. We call it a business case, you call it an ROI report, whatever version of that you like, and they can make it industry specific, persona specific, and then boom, you use that, present it, and then from that it turned into a collaborative tool. You put it in front of the prospect, and the prospect says, oh, like how do I change this? And then they go in and change it, and you can track it. This was like the very initial version of Enablism. It wasn't called Enablism. It was just called VersaPay Savings Calculator or something like that at the time. And I was not focused on this as my core deliverable. I was focused on driving revenue and being a bridge to product, being a bridge to product marketing. But I was seeing this thing grow in terms of internal usage and adoption. And that's where things started to feel like this could be something. But then we went into COVID. So VersaPay got sold. VersaPay had a great exit. It was the first time I had like a kind of major liquidity kind of event that I was a part of. I was super happy about that experience. And immediately where my mind went was, how do I go repeat this experience that I had? I wasn't really thinking, how do I go productize this? Because I just hadn't seen enough to feel like it was actually like a big problem out there. So I just needed to go do more things in my career and mature a bit. And so my kind of journey continued there not focused on this thing. But as I went to the next organization and I get into the role and I understand it, my mandate a bit more, I see the same pattern repeating over and over. What's changing is the domain and the context. And so I have this kind of code base, which is, you can think of a hard-coded value model in it, which was the original value model. And I'm like, wait, if I just change the model, change the language, change the terminology, then I could do something at this company and so on. So this kind of evolution with some maybe add a bit more bells and whistles to the tooling continues. I'm moving more from pre-sales roles to senior product roles. And that's my career evolution. In fact, my move into product was so pronounced that in my last organization that I was at, a supply chain tech company called Gain Systems, I was completely out of the revenue side of things. I was just managing very infrastructure heavy, tech heavy product. It was at this organization where, even though I was a degree of separation away from people that were managing the value models and things like that, the patterns were once again the same. And this time it just felt too jarring to me to not treat it with more seriousness, because the kind of thing that I saw that was even more pronounced here was that the value articulation problem was not just in the sales domain. It was also something that marketing was facing quite acutely. And simple things like the marketing team responsible for websites and landing pages needed to change the tonality of their assets to be more value focused, and they were struggling to do that. Meanwhile, I had just worked with the pre-sales team to turn that Excel calculator into something more dynamic, or spreadsheet calculator. And so I said, hey, like, we could really easily translate this into something for marketing. And that's when it started to click that, hey, like, you see something happen 4 or 5 times. Now it's not a fluke anymore. I felt like I needed to do something about it. And then from there, you start thinking of names and, hey, I'm going to enable, and Enablism was born. So
I love that. A couple things to unpack there. I happen to be a value engineer by trade, so everything that Ron is saying resonates with me. Yeah. Not all of our audience, if there is any audience, is going to land on. So I'm going to try to deconstruct like what we said a little bit. In the simplest form or explanation definition that you could offer, what is value?
Yeah, some people call it like the other side of pricing, right? So ultimately, you're bringing some kind of product or service to market. And this is useful to someone because it is delivering some kind of value. It's a simple question at face value, but actually thinking through this, understanding your customers, understanding what do they perceive as value. Part of it is perception as well. Different people get different aspects of value. They perceive value differently. Are you giving someone back some time? Are you giving someone back the ability to unlock another task? Have you freed up some cognitive load? Have you saved some hard dollars in the process? And these are all things that as you bring a product to market, you understand better by just talking to your customers. This is the very initial seed of what you start to say are your value creation aspects of your product or your value drivers. But then as you move into something that's a more mature motion and you have a 100-person sales team, they don't have access to this kind of initial nuggets of value. And so now you have to make it a bit more programmatic. You need to educate, you need to enable, and that's all the stuff that, grows out of that initial seed of value.
Yeah, I would say, I think to me, the way I think of it is value is what a product or solution does for you, not how it does it. I'm going to run this past you because I've been using this analogy a little bit. I'll see how it lands. This will be my pressure test. In technology and software, a lot of times, the majority of people are technical. So they have a tendency to use the technical aspects of the solution or product as like the crutch to have conversations around it. And those conversations are sales conversations. To me, if you compare it to buying a car, like the functions and features of a car are 4 tires, an engine, and like the gauges, right? Nobody buys a car because of 4 tires, engine, and gauges. If the car doesn't have 4 tires, engine, and gauges, this is non-starter. We're not going to have that conversation. So usually we're in a competitive marketplace. So we're competing against other people selling cars. But if you're a savvy salesperson selling a car, you're not trying to say that we have the best engine, we have the best tires, we have the best gauges, because there's minimal differentiation in the marketplace on those things. But like you can really make a lot of headway by understanding why the customer would want to buy said car. What are they going to use it for, right? If you have to commute to work, right? That's value, right? It's going to get you to and from work. if you have to pick up kids from soccer, right? That's value. That's the reason why you're buying the car, not because of the tires. It better have tires, non-starter. But if it doesn't, going on a weekend trip, going on vacation, being able to get to and from the doctors if you need to, not having to rely on public transportation, which gets back to what you were talking about of it's buying you back time. You don't have to go wait for a bus. You don't have to hail an Uber or a ride share or pay for those in one-offs. Like, you own the vehicle, you leave your house, you go to your driveway, get in your car and leave. It's giving you back time as an example.
And the tailoring of that, I like the analogy, and I would say there have been moments in my life to build on that analogy where having a car is actually a value detractor for me because I'm commuting in a busy place. I'm going to sit in traffic. For me, value is having time to work on my way to work, and the value was achievable through public transit. And so that's my unlock there. And that's really a value-driven decision. I hate wasting time, and what can give me back the time? I love the analogy, and it's, for me, very relatable as well.
Yeah, same thing. I had a 2-hour round trip commute several years ago, and it was valuable for me for a period of time because I used that time to listen to podcasts and listen to audiobooks.
Yeah.
But after so many years, you can only listen to so many podcasts, you can only read so many books, and you need time for execution of those ideas that you're taking in. So for me, having a car was good, right? Because I could leverage it for my commute. But at some point in time, like, there was diminishing returns of that solution. And if you're in a city and you have access to public transportation and the cost to maintain the car and pay for parking exceed the value that you're getting from that vehicle, then that doesn't make sense. But the conversation that we're now having is not about the gauges, engine, tires. It's about how that fits into your life and the value that it's creating or detracting from.
Exactly. It's a fundamental, like, I am looking for this, and this is a mechanism that gets me that value. Do I care about the color of the bus or how big the bus is and so on? Sure, maybe I think a bit about, like, is this a very busy route? But ultimately, that's still not my primary thing around optimization. Yeah.
So we have an understanding of what value is. The reason why we're having this conversation is organizations for a long period of time have gotten really good at selling their functions and features. The industry has recognized, the sellers along with the buyers, that they're making smarter, more informed decisions, and or they need to make smarter, more informed decisions. So there's individuals who are value engineers or business value consultants like me, and there's solutions on the marketplace that Karan has, such as Enablism, that help value engineers such as myself do my job. And what that job is, not just specifically for value engineers, but for, say, software organizations selling software to other businesses to help them run their business, is to create a business case that illustrates the value that solution is going to give them in their company.
I think fundamentally everything that you said is right, but my journey leading up to that, I noticed a couple of things that for me were fundamental to building Enablism, which was that, number one, as the seller, if you are not doing the education, enablement, and co-creation of talking through value with your prospect, you can be assured they're doing it by themselves or they're doing it with a competitor. And so if you're not helping control the narrative, if you're not helping set the foundation, it's happening anyway. It just doesn't include you in that discussion. And we're talking, obviously, when I say this, I'm somewhat biased toward more of a solution sale, more of product that has a sort of higher ACV, but has a longer sales cycle and so on. But that's a lot of sort of enterprise B2B now. And the other aspect to this is that you mentioned that your role as a value engineer, I feel like I'm going to say something that I hope you won't find offensive, but it's not meant to be offensive. It's just that, to me, an organization that has a value engineer, the first kind of question that comes to my mind is, what were you doing as an organization before you had the value engineer? And so it's great that you have a value engineer or value engineering team now. And I know a bit of your context and I know how elaborate that structure is, because my career has been skewed towards smaller organizations. So anyone out there that's listening to this, that is a product marketer, a solutions engineer, these are roles that typically, because it's cross-functional, because it's between sales and product, or because it's between product and marketing, you get shoved into this kind of de facto, hey, you build the value model or you build the calculator and all this sort of stuff. And when I went out to the marketplace looking for tools at the start of this journey, what I found was that most of the tools that are out there are very focused on value teams and more mature teams. And I understand that. The way I like to rationalize around this is that imagine you have a finance team and you're building a company from scratch. The first maybe few months, you just have a few expenses, you have some income, you're completely adequate just managing it on a spreadsheet. But after a period of time, you need something more robust. And so what do you do next? I think we all know, most people know about this app called QuickBooks. You go to QuickBooks and you start building, you managing your books on there. Imagine you grow and you get to like X millions of revenue. You say, okay, I've outgrown QuickBooks, and you go to the next stage. So the question that I came to was that, where is the QuickBooks of value? If I'm a product marketer, if I'm a solutions engineer, how do I get out of that spreadsheet, which is like inherently very limiting, cells and rows and columns, etc.? How do I get into something a bit more dynamic, multidimensional, collaborative, etc.? And these are some core tenets of what's driving Enablism.
So a lot of what you said resonates with me in my experience, and I am certainly not offended by the fact of what were these organizations doing before they hired a team of value engineers or business value consultants. I have a hot take on that. A lot of organizations want to become value sellers, right? Again, we said it before, organizations that are purchasing software have to make smarter, more informed decisions as time goes on and budget constraints get tighter. There's more of an onus on making your first decision the right decision. And in order to do that, it has to be informed, right? So a tool like Enablism can help inform buyers of the value they're going to derive from the solution they're going to purchase. That's what value engineers do, and they use tools such as Enablism to do that. A lot of organizations, though, this I'm going to try to tie in a couple points, they don't have a through line of value in the organization. Like, we recognize that people operate in silos, and that has to happen to an extent because people have different competencies, right? Like, marketing isn't value engineers, and value engineers aren't marketers, right? The same with product people. And then in marketing, you have product marketing, etc. There's different variants of that as well. One of the challenges of being in the space that I've recognized is the cross-departmental collaboration on what the value of our solution is, number one. And number two, not everybody recognizes that organizationally we're value sellers and our messaging needs to be value forward, right? Like, you can go to organizations that have value engineers or value consultants, and you can look at their online copy and all of it's about AI this or functions and features that. But there's a team of value engineers that work there. So obviously there's some sort of breakdown.
Yeah.
I propose organizations to have a value center of excellence that should be owned by a value team. And that value center of excellence should coordinate the value selling motion and the value messaging amongst the organization. It could be a hub with folks going out to the different departments. I haven't seen the solution for that, but I have seen it go sideways a lot.
And probably the biggest example of this most people would relate to is the pre-sale to post-sale transition, right? Because that's most visceral for people. The classic example of, you did all these things to win the business, you won the business, and then you're going to condense all of that into some Salesforce HubSpot fields and a 30-minute handoff. And now it's the domain of a completely disconnected other team in the organization. And I saw this firsthand, and I was guilty of this as well, because you feel like the organization trains you to think like your job is to win the business and maybe support a bit post-sale. But now you have customer success people, and God bless those customer success people, because it's a very challenging job. And so in this context, I think about, okay, people understand that. But really, to your point, Randall, the same issue exists in marketing to sales. The same issue exists in sales to pre-sales and so on and so forth. And unless you have some kind of through line, combination of process, like you said, combination of that culture, combination of technology to support that. And the technology, I'm not even biased to it. Whatever technology enables you to communicate consistent value, I think it makes a big difference. And I've seen it make a big difference. And I think that we are now entering the territory of things moving so fast, and you have to really differentiate on outcomes and value, because otherwise it's just noise. The noise is really unbearable. Yeah.
Let's take a quick break from today's episode. If you're enjoying the conversation, take a second to like, follow, or subscribe wherever you're tuning in. We'd really appreciate it. You can also find us on Instagram at Randall Osche. That's RANDALLOSCHE. And check out more at podcast.randallosche.com, including show notes and other resources from today's episode. All right, back to the conversation.
So we covered that you were part of a successful exit previously, and that sort of informed your decision of where you were going to head in next. But how did you get to where you're at for that first job? Like, how did you get into technology?
Yeah, the buildup was one that was rooted in things like software engineering. It's like a fun time when I remember around, let's say 2005-ish time frame where I was in high school. And at the time, it was not commonplace for small businesses like our private high school, whatever it was, like to have websites and stuff like that. So I was getting into HTML 1.0, flashing things on web pages, all these sorts of things. So I was part of like these very primitive competitions, like web design competitions. You would build pages and enter competitions. Part of one of my projects was to build my high school's first website. So I was always going down that track. It was a very kind of natural next step for me as I got through school to go into a technical program. And around that time, this kind of discipline around software engineering was starting to come up. So it wasn't just computer engineering or computer science, it was software engineering. And so I didn't want to be too mathematical. Like I wanted to actually apply my skills. So I went into university. By the way, I grew up in Dubai. So this was like also a kind of a life transition for me, moving to Canada, specifically Ottawa, which was a transition of, let's say, going from in Celsius plus 45 to essentially at the depths of winter in Ottawa, minus 40. So think about like 80-degree differential. And the 80-degree differential is interesting because imagine you have a consistent period of minus 40, minus 35. From that point, when the temperature rises 40 Celsius, you're above zero, that 40 Celsius rays feel so good that you might as well be in shorts at that point. So these days I live in a much more temperate place, relatively speaking. I live in Vancouver, and the temperature always in the winter months hovers around this kind of 0 to 5 Celsius range. And I'm just in shorts like all year round. It doesn't really matter. It's because of the prior context. When I was in university, I had an opportunity to work on campus in a role that I thought was going to be an IT role, like fixing hardware and all this sort of stuff. But that internship turned out to be a really fun, creative place where we started internally at the university building a SaaS product before things were called SaaS. It was a product that would help students with disabilities on campus manage their workflow better, such that when you have a disability, you're trying to limit the amount of steps that you have in processes. So not running from one end of a large campus to another, moving things digital. And this product that we built is called Ventus. And I'm going through university, and building this product got so fun that I just started skipping classes and just staying at my internship. And it's an internship, so you're not really making a ton of money, something like $55,000 a year or whatever. But it's the fun that you're having because you see these things in the classroom and then you actually see the real world happening over here. And this kind of started to heat up because the university environment is very kind of collegial, like university counselors talk to each other and other universities and so on. It's a tight-knit community. And we started getting outreach from inbound interest from other universities saying, hey, we see that you guys have built this product. Like, it would be really interesting can you license it to us? And you hit this like threshold with the university's risk averseness to being a software accelerator, so to speak. So I was having so much fun, and I became the kind of that engineering team lead. I was at the same time constrained by the fact that this thing couldn't go above this ceiling of what we had built. But the experience started to turn me into someone that was just seeking that kind of startup thrill. So when that kind of episode reached its natural conclusion, I just went out and started seeking startups, and I bounced around a couple places, some success, some learnings, but mostly failures. And after some period of time, as you get a bit older, you're just looking for more money and more stability. And I drew on some past advice that I got from the university days. One of my mentors there said to me that he observed that I was someone that did well in things like client meetings or just environments where business and technical things mesh together. And so I ran with that and I went down this path of discovery of what other roles out there that can get me a mix of business and technical. And I tried support, I tried professional services, I tried implementation roles, customer success roles, and none of them really, I never felt like I was getting the sweet spot. Maybe the company was too large, maybe the role was too constrained. And so I'm on this journey of discovery and year goes by and you start to feel like, I don't know if I'm ever going to find my sweet spot. But then I had finally reached a point, I think in 2017, where a recruiter reached out to me and said, hey, we've got this technical sales role and it's in the fintech space. And I knew nothing about the domain and I knew nothing about pre-sales, but it definitely seemed quite compelling and the money was good. And so I got into it. And that was the kind of thing that just changed for me, because as soon as I got in, the team was really strong and I figured that I was now finally in my sweet spot. And then we went down this path of figuring out that I'm going to do things that are technical and I'm going to do demos. I'm going to enable my sales colleagues. I'm going to go hire more sales engineers. I'm going to tailor my messaging to different audiences. I'm going to rack up a ton of miles traveling, even in Mexico, actually. We had some prospect in Mexico, but in the US, a lot of trips to Florida and so on and so forth. And in all of this, embedded in all of it was that we were just doing a good job of talking value and giving our prospects value. And this, like, you've been in various sales and value roles. You know that sometimes as a pre-sales person, your audience, your customer is the salesperson. You're trying to give value to the salesperson. And so we just started to feel like the sales team was really buying into what the pre-sales team was doing. And this was all like a very strongly positive reinforcement cycle. They got acquired. The space was very hot. And then what timing? Because we got acquired and then boom, we hit COVID and then everyone's life changed after that.
In doing the podcast and having 30 some interviews at this point, there's some themes that have risen. And one of them you had pointed out is, like you said, you had a mentor that had given you this advice based on like their observation of how you move best. And that reminds me of people need people, right? You need mentors in your life. You need people that are like the guides that can say, recognize and see a strength in you that you might not have seen yourself. And you need a support network. But just want to point out, like, from the mentorship, that aligns with what everybody that I've interviewed, like in some form or fashion, they've gotten support or guidance or mentorship from somebody. And I don't want that to get lost in the conversation. The other thing that you said is, you didn't say it like this, but at the company that had the exit, like, you found your tribe, right? Like, you bounced around intentionally or otherwise from place to place, didn't find your niche, didn't feel like you were really using all the tools in your toolbox. But then you got to this place and like it all just fit. And one of the things I've talked about a lot, and my guests have talked about a lot, whether it's about where you live, where you work, or who you're around, go to where you're treated best.
Pushed as well, to a strong degree, like being pushed to do better. And there's this kind of like natural performance expectation because the people around you are performing at a high level. You realize you're only going to survive here if you keep pushing the limits as well.
Yeah. I work out often and I've worked out in different gyms. And sometimes I go into gyms and I'm like, I feel really good. Like, I'm the strongest, fittest dude in this place. And I'm like, who am I comparing myself to? Everybody's a retiree, Randall. It doesn't count.
Yeah.
But unless like you have that reflective moment and you pressure check that yourself, situations and environments can get away from you. But if the people around you have become complacent and there's no longer a drive for excellence or growth, you is going to become complacent and not grow to your full potential as well. A question that I had for you on a lot of people, I think that you had a really good experience from the internship while you're at university, where you could see both sides of the coin, like academia and the real world. And those are two different worlds. I would just wonder, maybe a bit of a trick question, but what was more valuable to you, academia or that real world application and experience that you had?
Yeah, I think like for me, the university was not so much about being in the class or optimizing for GPA and things like that. Honestly, like, I even had a thought before going to university, do I even need to go to university? And my mom pushed me into it very strongly, and she had her reasons to push me into it. But actually, I realized after the fact that it was not so much like what I learned in the classroom. It was one, the opportunity that I had, the pathways that it opened up. And this is interesting because we were at the time, universities were really a pathway to many different things, to your first job, to your network, to your professional network, to your new friends that, like you're going to meet in this new phase of life, to adapting to a new city, a new town, if that's part of your context. So these were the pathways that I felt that opened up, and some of the relationships that you start to build and what you learn from the skills that other people have. Like you think like you might be someone that's like really good in your high school environment or whatever, but then you go into university and people operating at a different level. And this is all the stuff that I think I took away the most from university. The fact that there was this kind of added bonus, like very real world kind of intensive way to apply my skills was definitely the peak of it. I was also lucky that at the time, do you remember BlackBerry was a thing? Like I got a chance to do an internship at BlackBerry. I got a chance to go to what was at the time Facebook for an internship as well. So all these things were just like great ways for me to get out of my comfort zone to some extent. You go to a hackathon in Menlo Park and you see the way people operate. I would never just go to a hackathon in Menlo Park unless there was this kind of supporting context around it. So it was all of these experiences that are a stepping stone. I have a son now. And I realized something, which is that actually you can apply this to AI models as well. But when you're going through this kind of learning process with your child and your toddler or whatever it is, you can't see it necessarily all the time, but they have a very gradual kind of set of baby steps that they learn first. And then it turns into something a bit more complex, and that turns into something a bit more complex. But when they get to 3 years old and they start stringing together these like longer sentences and stuff like that, sometimes feels like they went from nothing to those 3-word, 5-word sentences. But actually, it was just in there, like in the background all the time. They were just picking up, putting one and one together and then putting one more together. And this is the sort of stuff that I think university was for me at a different scale. So yeah, bit of both.
Yeah. I am pro education. I think that you just need to be super thoughtful about it and understand the return on investment, especially here in the United States where it can be rather pricey. Yeah. But the internships to me aren't necessarily part of the academia, right? Yes, you got exposure to these internships via academics and the institution that you were attending. Was that part of the curriculum, or was this something that like you knew that you should go find internships?
We talk about value right now that I apply like a value oriented lens to it, because for me, a lot of it, the value was like, it was so much more fun than being in the classroom. But to get to that stage, it was just that the University of Ottawa, we're just really focused on opening up some early career development pathways for folks. I think most on-campus internships would have just been like the actual IT role. It wouldn't have been like, hey, let's develop some software. So I think I got really lucky. Like, I think luck is a big part of this. That experience came from my manager who was over there. His name is Alex, and his desire to try to improve a workflow problem that he saw in front of him. He was the manager that was managing this kind of a technical group of people that were supporting these counselors. And so his desire to do something about it created this opportunity where we tagged along and we said, like he said, you guys are all software developers, computer scientists. Why would you be here fixing computers? So his generosity in that and his mentorship in that, because look, it's not like he's going to go make more money for going above and beyond his mandate, right? So he was also like doing something that was an act of generosity for us. And was it ever? It was just such a tremendous learning experience. And I don't think everyone's lucky enough to get that. So many things had to come together for that to happen. But then once that happens, I knew that I would just be all over that opportunity, and these things don't happen often. So I jumped all over it. And at some point, I'm like, you know what? This job is going to get me. People think of, okay, I come out of university, optimize for your first job. I had my first job by year 4 because it was going so well. They said, we give you a job offer day 1. And I just remembered that kind of feeling of when I called my parents and I'm like, hey, you know what? Like, I don't have to worry about getting a job. Like, it's all sorted out. Isn't this the point of university? Who cares about my GPA anymore? And honestly, I should have probably paid a bit more attention. But now I think about it, who's ever asked for it? No one actually cared. Didn't stop me from achieving anything. I think I ended up with a B average or something like that.
I didn't take college as seriously as I should have when I was doing it, but nonetheless, nobody's ever asked me for my GPA.
Exactly. Yeah.
Getting back to Enablism, as a founder, what has been the hardest part of starting Enablism that you didn't anticipate?
Yeah, I think that I went into this. I think most founders have some naivety about what they do. Like you really see this problem many times over and you try to start a solution for it. So I felt like I'm coming into this. I've been at a few organizations now and I'm seeing the world around me and I'm asking people around me like, hey, how do you solve this problem? And people are consistently saying spreadsheets. So you realize, okay, there is a problem to solve here. I'm not too concerned about that. But then you get into it and you get into, okay, today I have a business and this business is going to be what sustains me in the future. I have some fundamental conviction around this. Okay. I don't have 50 customers. I have some conviction. And for a period of time, I'm just going to live like an idiot, right? I can probably find you some external sources of validation. I can tell you that I talked to this guy, Randall, and Randall told me I have a good idea. Like I can tell you all of these things. Ultimately, it's got to translate into revenue of some sort. And then this takes you down the path of who are you? And you asked about this a bit earlier. Who are we really trying to bring a product to market for? That leads you into this thing of, okay, like there are some like pre-existing products that are going after the very enterprise end of the market. And all of this led to this kind of realization that we are the QuickBooks of value, right? And then you take that message, but honestly, it takes a while to marinate. So then most of my time as a founder up to this year has been days where it's like dead zone. Okay. There's no one validating what you're doing. There's no customer to talk to. You are building everything from nothing. Yeah, there's prospects, there's people that are interested, but there's a kind of intrinsic desire. There's a fire from that conviction. And I often wonder, Randall, is that without this conviction, if I did not have this conviction, I don't think I would still be here because things just don't come that easy. And I'm not trying to sell $100 a month product. We are selling something that is maybe even some change management that's part of it. You're asking people to change behavior and that doesn't come easy. And so all of this to say that the hardest part of this was that those long days where you have no colleagues to motivate you, you have no calendars it's just you and your thoughts and your ideas and your keyboard and you just do stuff. And so we've had moments as we get to starting to see some early signs of results where, and I'd love to share more about this in a future podcast as well, where you do get those big sources of validation. Someone saying to you, I'm going to pay you money and be a customer. I would like you to be a partner. I would like you to do XYZ. And there's actual dollars behind it. It's not just people being kind. You'll also see a lot of people sometimes are going to be kind. And it's just like how people, I think the natural instinct is you don't want to disappoint others and you'll just say some pleasantries, but you don't actually mean it. So if you are considering coming on this journey, being a founder, I think just contemplate and consider what is that thing, that intrinsic fire that will motivate you to get through those long, hard days when no one else is going to give you any motivation or any encouragement. And if you feel like there is that and you can stick through it, then I think it'd be a pretty fun ride and you can come out on the other side feeling pretty good about it. That's not to say we're all completely out of the woods either, but it's now starting to look like the probabilities are a lot more in our favor. And that is a good feeling. It doesn't take off any of the pressure by any means, but it just feels like you're actually building something useful.
One of the things that I've recognized in my own journey, whether it's career, gym, or like starting this podcast, is like everything starts with an idea or an inception of an idea.
Yeah.
And even thinking of the gym or pivoting careers, like you have an understanding that it's going to be hard and take time. But what I've experienced is it's going to be harder than you imagined, even if you imagined it's going to be hard. And it's going to take longer than you anticipate, even if you knew it was going to take a long period of time. And I think if you have that like inherent desire to accomplish the thing, that's going to help propel you through the journey. But there's no shortcuts to this thing, whatever you're trying to accomplish. And like whatever self-help guide somebody's selling online or clickbait article, like it's just going to require time and effort and persistence to create it. And if you're not doing that, you're not getting to the result that's actually going to provide any value to you or to anybody else. Regarding like Enablism, And you've mentioned like the QuickBooks. There's larger solutions out there that fit a larger enterprise client. And that's not the space that I think that you're competing in, as you mentioned, like the QuickBooks of Value. So with that said, who are your customers today? Who are you looking to be your customers tomorrow? What's your ideal customer look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's simply a very classic kind of organization for us is someone that is, let's say, 50 employees to maybe 250, 300 employees. They have a lot of kind of a growing sales revenue organization, a growing customer success organization. They have products or offerings that are requiring there's a solution sale aspect to it. And you are needing to deliver value because you might be in a competitive environment, whatever that may be. Doesn't have to be SaaS, doesn't have to be software. We do work with service companies as well, but basically like consulting organizations, etc., because they have value elements associated there as well. And you find yourself with a growing number of resources that are sitting in the pockets between teams, like pre-sales resources, product marketing resources, and you want to empower these resources to be change agents within the organization to bring about value. To bring it back to something that you said earlier, Randall, around the value center of excellence, I like that concept a lot. I like that it gives people something to rally behind. The only place I would probably diverge from it a bit is maybe in its implementation, in that I think a value center of excellence should be initiated by maybe a combination of product marketing and pre-sales, if an organization has those functions, powered by tooling that we offer as a path to graduation to a much more mature, evolved value center of excellence and a value team and value more larger in $200,000 value tools, all those kinds of things. And so think of us as that kind of transition, both to enable the change and to facilitate these change agents. I was a change agent within my organization. I love being that person that took a product message and brought it to marketing. And now, what if I could do that without spreadsheets as my kind of uni tool?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. As we go to wrap up this episode, two questions I always like to ask because it's important to me. But what is one piece of advice that you would give your younger self? And the context isn't about regret, but more so about reflection. What's maybe the one biggest life lessons you've learned so far that had you understood this sooner, it would have propelled you further faster?
This is probably where I've never been risk averse, but on reflection, I could probably take even more risk. So if you said there was a spectrum of risk and there's risk averse and like pro risk, I was definitely like pretty far on the pro risk. I would have told myself, man, just like fully we're indexed on that, because really, like, you think about circumstances now, I am taking these risks when I have a younger family, because now I'm changing my frame of reference and then thinking, hey, when I have my second child or my whatever comes after that, it will be even riskier then. So now I might as well take all the maximum risk. So then I question, what was I doing 10 years ago? It's a fine line between reflection and regret. And it's hard to sometimes not cross that line. But I often think about, I had these ideas, I had the skills. And so I reflect on, I should have productized many more things before. One of the reflections I had was, maybe when I was at university and we were building this SaaS product, maybe I should have just done something crazy and gone and tried to find investors that would help me buy this product. Or I would have relinquished all the salary they paid me and tried to get the intellectual property instead. Maybe I should have done something so crazy. And so that's the kind of stuff that I think about looking back, is sometimes you just have to be crazy. And I wish I was crazier sometimes.
Yeah, but like all those like dots lead you to where you were today.
Exactly. Yeah.
Last question, I think. What's the most influential book you've ever read?
Yeah, the Steve Jobs book, the Steve Jobs autobiography. I don't read like a ton of books. Like I ought to read more. I probably read more on my phone than I should, but I just remember reading the Steve Jobs book, and that was it. I never felt this way reading a book. Like I was gripped. It was just so gripping. Like that modality has never really appealed to me. I used to read more as a younger child, but in my adult life, that book was just felt so like I was so hooked into the experience and felt like so visceral. And then now you see some of it come to life with these documentaries and things like that. But the book did such a good job of making his life, recollecting that whole thing in such a visceral way. So that was easy one for me.
Excellent. And for the listeners out there that want to go find you or Enablism, where can they go find you or your company?
Yeah, would love to talk to anyone that's heard some of this and wants to exchange any notes. So yeah, LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on there, and email at Karan@enablism.com, and the website. One of my criteria for getting a web for a name, I wanted to get the .com. And so enablism.com, it's that simple.
Perfect. Karan Khiani, lovely conversation. Appreciate you being part of the show. And just a plug for people that are out there on LinkedIn that think LinkedIn isn't useful. Karan and I actually came across each other about a year or so ago on LinkedIn, and we've been professional connections since. And I'd like to think that it's been a mutually beneficial relationship between us since.
Yeah, Randall, good stuff here. Really enjoy seeing your podcast grow from this kind of seed into something that you're spending all this time, dedicating all this time into, and happy to support it and just excited to see it grow.
Appreciate it. You take care. Thank you.
Thanks.
And that wraps up today's conversation on the Randall Osche podcast. Thanks again to our guest for sharing their time, knowledge, and lessons with us. If the episode brought you any value, the best way to support the show is to follow or subscribe on your favorite platform. That helps us reach more people like you. You can also visit podcast.randallosche.com for blog posts, full transcripts, and other episode resources. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, stay sharp, stay curious, and keep moving forward.